This is really, really, really cool. And you're in for a nice treat. I want to thank you for being here for our Small Business Big Impact webinar series for small business leaders to really come together and interact and share. And it's a little bit different than a networking group, right? This is more about interaction and building and learning and growing together. And Tevis and I took August off, and now we're back, we're refreshed. And this is the perfect time to talk about self first and the bottom line, right? Because there's so much hustle going on right now. Sweta and I talk about hustle mentality, and so do Tevis and I a lot. And it's important that we make time to connect, make the connection between our financial, right, our physical, our emotional, and our social well-being on our entrepreneurship and our business, right? Because without you, there is no business. Yeah. And so a lot of people choose to sort of put that aside. I got no time. I got to run, And when you really look at the bottom line, not only on the financials, but on your staff and on your personal growth, on their growth, on your client and business development, it makes a difference, right? So a couple of ground rules, which you all know, is definitely lean in with insights from your own experience and your own business. Feel free to push the conversation by sharing and being curious, and use the chat right in there. We'll have times when we're all talking, but if you have something burning, feel free to use the chat, and keep it mutual and pitch free. So this is a pitch free zone. And we like to look at each other as coaches for each other, not people who tell each other what to do. So check yourself on giving advice when possible, unless somebody asks for it. And just so you all know, the next one of these will be October 21st. We're going to do another hot seat edition. And that is all about putting a business leader in what I'm calling the hot seat, but it's really a great coaching opportunity for them to experience from us and to solve a problem, which often is a similar problem to what someone else's experiences. So that's why we do it together. So we have one person already ready to go, and we have another spot open. If anyone's interested, we could talk more about that. And so again, you met Sweta, and she is amazing. I know her for many years. And she reminded me that September is self-care month, and today is the last day of self-care month. And
not too late.
What's that? It's
not too late.
Not too late. We can do this. We can really do this. And so that's why we're doing this topic. And so not only is she a super amazing friend and woman, but she has a part-time day job, okay, that she is a marketing guru at. She has her own Ayurvedic-based coaching business, and she is getting her doctorate in that, right? And she's the author of now 12 books, and this is her latest book, A Piece of Peace, which is beautiful. I highly suggest you take a read of it. And I wanted to just welcome you, my dear.
Oh, thank you so much, Marjorie. I am flying right now. That's such a wonderful way to end Self-Care September and to start the morning. Thank you so much for your kind words. And it's so lovely to be here with everyone, especially a group of women who care about themselves as much as they care about their business. It's my happy place. So I'm excited to be here and to chat with everyone. I have a lot of my own personal stories. We become teachers, so to speak, when we fail as students, or when we want to learn more as students. So I've been that kid who's fallen off the path, and I'm very grateful for that, because that's what's helped me get where I am today. Because it's not a failure, it's not a mistake if you learn something from it, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's what this is all about. Like I was talking to her before, and we were just saying, like, if people can leave this with just like one little nugget of something that they can put into their life, then that's like makes my heart pound beautifully and fast. So when you guys signed up, we had you share a go-to practice, and I gotta admit, I was pretty impressed. You guys have some really amazing go-to practices when you have a crisis at work. Because really, as I was saying, it's like you're dealing with stuff outside of work, and if you don't recognize that you're a human being and are able to manage that, there's no way that's not going to impact your business, right? So believe it or not, if you don't take care of yourself, it impacts not only your bottom line, but everybody around you, like I said. So we're going to get to a poll. Let me launch it. I'm curious. So client calls, changes every freaking thing. What do you do? You guys are impressive. So 80% of you said take a pause, breathe, and step away before doing anything. One person said all of the above. I gotta say, I'm super impressed because when I read those practices, I was like, they don't do that.
Oh, but wait, don't you think, and I'm going to out me and Marjorie, don't you think that we do kind of take a pause and breathe on it before we dive in and kind of look at the big picture?
I think that we absolutely do.
Okay.
And I think that, so yeah, I'm going to give us a little pat on the back there. And I'm going to give you all a pat on the back because,
Yay.
you know, I worked in advertising for 10 years. That was a slam the door, scream, act like a 10-year-old kind of business at the time. You know, that's how people reacted to crisis. That's how Nancy and I know each other back from those days, actually. So we're a very well-known creative shop. And so it really, how does it impact your business? I'm going to ask you guys to share a little bit about this. How does it impact your business when you do take that pause?
I mean, in my experience of just dealing with crisis, you know, going into triage mode may happen pretty quickly, you know, after you breathe, but sometimes you find out it's actually not a crisis. Like it's just a misunderstanding. And so that's sort of my lesson learned of like, wait a second, is this really happening? You know, I think that's why it's like that, oh shit moment. And maybe you are breathing, but you're like, oh shit. And you're like, okay, and your mind is racing, trying to figure out the risks. Who said what? Is this real? Check it out. And then, you know, you take your action.
Yeah.
My ideas.
I hear you, Laura, on that because I mean, how many times have I received an email and I just say, I'm just not going to email that right. I'm not going to respond right away. And 25% of the time it goes away. Like it just goes away somehow by me not doing a blessed thing because somebody's realized it's a misunderstanding or they figured out how to solve it or something like that. So there is real value in pausing for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and I'll also add to that, Marjorie. I think over the years, I used to be a very reactive person when I was younger. Like it was like that fire within, you know, in Ayurveda speak, it's called pitta. Like I had like fire, you know, you want to make a difference, so you speak up. And if you don't have your center, you're always going to be that fireball who's spitting in all directions. Versus when you have your sense of center, then you respond, you don't react. And I think deep breathing and pausing really fuels that kind of response. Because it's okay, it's definitely necessary to speak up, definitely necessary to respond, but it's also equally important to know what bridges to burn and what not. And if you are that person who's always reacting, then you're doing damage. The crisis is one thing, you spend so much time doing damage control, right? So I think that pause also, to Laura's point, not only gives us perspective, like maybe on a scale to 1 to 10, I thought it was 20 and maybe it was just 2. And oftentimes there is also this power that we forget of the written word and how we perceive it. We all have different ways to communicate. We all wake up on the different side of the bed. I might have written something and might not have meant it inside my head, but if Marjorie, you reading it, you might respond or react to it differently, right? So we all bring our experiences and baggages, and that pause also takes care of that. It allows you to hold space for other people. And I'm not talking about being a carpet that everyone walks on, not at all, but just holding space and not personalizing, because I don't like giving people so much authority over my life where they can walk in, shake me up, and leave. And
Yeah.
that pause really helps build that practice. Like sometimes, yeah, I will stand up and shake you up, but other times I'll be like, no, it wasn't worth it. So I feel like it helps you all to also channelize where your energy goes, because you grow where your energy goes. And sometimes you just have to make choices.
Yeah, I want to share two thoughts. One is Tevis also wrote a book, The Game Changer's Guide to Radical Success. And in that book,
Mm.
she talks a lot about the power pause and how much power there is in taking that pause. And I've been using that a lot in my coaching business as well with leaders. And it's life-changing what we're talking about. And what you just said, Shreeta, as well, is that, you know, Travis and I are doing a empathetic leadership training program. And we're talking about how hard it is to lead in a hybrid work environment and how one person's delight is another person's just dread. And to your point, how people read things differently, how people internalize everything. We're all human beings, and we're doing so much over the virtual airwaves. You know, it is really important to understand that things can be misinterpreted. So I appreciate that. I want to get to someone else is coming in. I want to get to the book a little bit, and in it, one of the things that you said that I really that stuck with me is you had no idea that mindfulness and intentional breathing would light up my creativity. Right. So what was that spark for you? How did you recognize that those were the things that really lit up your creativity?
You know, it's so it sounds I'm trying to phrase this nicely, and there's no nice way of doing this. So people who say, you know, I want to write but never get anything done, there's one category. So in the writing world, they're called as amateurs. And then there are people who write for a living, or, you know, they write on the side. It's like someone like Travis, you know, you have books and you have this company. So you got it done, right? And I think that's when the intentionality comes in very handy. We can keep talking about various projects, but unless you carve out that time to do it, add it to your calendar or whatever your productivity process is, right? It never gets done. And I, as a writer, would go to writing retreats once a year up until the pandemic happened. And it was always very fascinating to me how I met some people who every year came with a new project because the old project was done, not that because it was shelved. And then there were some people, there was one woman who showed up for 10 years, wonderful person, but her book never got done because the conversation was so much about, I want to get this book done, but there was never any intention around it. So there's the stereotype of a creative lifestyle. Oh, you need to stay up late. You need to drink until so and so time. You need to do this. And we have this conversation. I'm like, you define those rules for yourself. You know, if clearly the stereotypes aren't working for you. So I think it was more noticing others and then realizing like every year that I went back, I did have a new project. And that was because like I'm a social animal. So I had time to socialize and be an extrovert and get some wine and try out new restaurants. But again, at the same time, there were hours in a day. Those were non-negotiable for me. I just got work done. So I think that's true of every profession, I would say. We have to be intentional with the time, especially as women, the pressures of everything that we have, you know, whether you're single, you're a mom, you're married, whatever be the situation, there is always that pressure of, and this needs to be done.
Yeah. And men too these days, right? Men, I see Peter on the line too. He, you know, you could, you know, there's a lot of truth in intention setting, and your story too is not one of exception where, you know, the resiliency that you have built based on your story. And I want you to share a little bit of your story really is telling, and that intention setting and some of the other lessons learned, right, that came out of that, I definitely want to get into. So maybe you can share a little bit about your story and sort of having a wrench thrown in when you have your intention set and you are thriving, you think, and then something happens, right?
Absolutely. So this was at the start when I said, like, you know, I fell off the wagon and this was my portion. So I used to be my doctor's nightmare. The big joke was, she was like, you show up to your annuals and there's just nothing wrong with you. And I would always joke, please stop jinxing it. And so this is 2018.
Can I pause for a second? How many people go to the doctor and their blood work is just, you know, what the doctor considers perfect? And Peter's, some people are laughing, or close to it, right? I encourage you that if you don't feel well, right, then you need to ask some more questions. So sorry to interrupt you, but go on.
No, but I'm so glad you brought that up. So even though, I teach and practice and live Ayurveda, which is an ancient medical system from India, the disconnect in my own self was so massive because end of the day, my blood work was fine. I was doing well. This is 2018. I'd won this big award for my novel Louisiana Catch with Chelsea Clinton and women, founders of the Me Too movement had. So I was just like on a high in life, right? So my husband and I, we went to Europe. We spent like 3 weeks hiking, all of that great stuff, tasting great wine. We come back and then I go to Maryland to help launch someone else's book. On the way back, I fall sick. So I'm sitting here and my abdomen like becomes thrice in size. I have no idea what's happening to my body. And lo and behold, like I get to New York, I'm rushed to the ER. The doctors don't know what's happening to me. And this goes on for 6 months before they figure out what's happened. And then the healing begins. The reason I share this is for several reasons. I was physically fit, but emotionally was I? So my point being, what Marjorie touched upon at the beginning, that wellness is not just about being physically fit or doing your 5K or your 10K. It's also taking care of your mental and emotional well-being and financial well-being. As a small business owner, because my doctors were like, you are our biggest nightmare, somewhere I have the confidence, arrogance, whatever. Like I didn't need to plan for what if something happens to me because there were no signs. And that's pretty presumptuous as a small business owner. Absence of illness doesn't mean presence of good health. That's a big, very big lesson for all of us to just because your blood work shows, and I'm not trying to scare anyone here, but the reality is we live in a world where there is so much stress and emotional wellness is tied into your mental well-being, is tied into your physical well-being. All of that is tied into your financial well-being, right? So when I couldn't do anything for 6 months, I lost my clients. I could barely walk or breathe. I mean, obviously I couldn't work. It was such a lesson learned because, you have to plan well for these times. And I don't just mean financially, even emotionally, and to have somebody in place that, God forbid, if this happens again, who's going to take care of the business? So all of these conversations and so that's been a very big learning tool for me, at least, that what you see on the outside doesn't mean that's what's going on in the inside. And that's what I talk a lot about in my book, A Piece of Peace. It's also coming to terms with who you are and the changes you need to make in your own lives. We can't constantly keep blaming others. Oh, this happened, or they did this to me, or this situation wasn't conducive. It's also going back to Tevis's book, like that power of pause, right? And the intention setting of how that will help you really it gives you a chance to catch up on your own bullshit. And my illness really gave me a chance to catch up on my own bullshit and build a better tomorrow.
Yeah, that's so meaningful. I mean, especially we're living through a global pandemic, obviously. So getting sick, I'm sure we've all seen somebody who has gotten sick and had to really take a step back and lose a few days of work. So who has at least a somewhat like a nugget of a plan in place if you had to step away from your business for a week? Yeah. And it's not to call you out and say, and to have you freaking freak out right now. Right. But I encourage you, and let's make this a little bit of a couple minute interactive. God, Tevis, you're on pause. On mute. What do you say?
I was just going, oh my God, everyone just came to the wellness talk and just got really stressed out.
I know, but that's the whole point. The whole point is we got to make that connection between well-being and your business. Right. And how many people don't have time for any well-being, like that? We hear that, Tevis and I hear that all the time. Like I said, we're doing an empathetic leadership workshop for a big media network, and it's the leaders of all the agencies, and they're trying to manage in a hybrid work environment. And we're teaching them how to train their staff to focus on a desired outcome, right? Instead of a problem, right? Because when you focus on a problem, you get the anxiety, right? The anxiety of not having a plan. And then you react, right? Whereas if you focus on a desired outcome, well, I really do want to think about how do I want my business to succeed if I have to step away for a week or two, or longer, right? So being proactive then, right, being empowered to think about that, and then ultimately focusing on a solution. So exercise number one, everybody, write down one thing that you're going to commit to planning around if you had to step away from your business for a week or two. It could be shut it down, right? It could be that. It could be make sure I have X amount of money in the bank. It could be anything, right? So write it down, and then I want you to share. And
I love that, Marjorie.
Yes, go ahead.
No, I love that you're suggesting just creating awareness. I think sometimes we don't think of these things. Like if it's a really large company, the HR does a lot of the thinking, right? But if it's like solopreneurs or small businesses, micro businesses, amongst the million other things that we do, sometimes we don't do intentional time setting for, if this happens, then what do I do instead of reacting? So I'm glad you giving us an opportunity to think about this.
Thank you. And it's inspired by you, my dear. Who wants to share? What can I?
Well, I would say when I was in 2014, when I first launched my business, I actually went to Israel. And so I needed to find somebody to take over the business, so to speak, while I was away. And that worked. But unfortunately, we're going forward now to 2021, and that person is no longer part of my team. So I guess for me, I would have to really think about who I would trust to take it over if something should happen to me. And that's something that's I'm going to have to think about.
Yeah.
You know, or possibly shut it down. I mean, it depends upon the status of the work too. You know, it depends. It's everything's cyclical. So it's possible that if I got sick or something happened, if there was a family emergency, if work was slow or things could be pushed back, then I would be able to shut it down and explain to the clients, you know, my situation. But it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to think about what's happening, they get hit by a bus, right? Nobody wants to think about
well, that's it. Then it's shut down. If you hit by a bus,
it's over.
That's done.
It's over.
Right. It's over. But
yeah.
even before I left, I said to my husband, because I hate to fly, this is where everything is. You know, this is my status of my billing. This is where my computer is. This is how you access everything. So I had my husband on board and I had another person on board just in case. Thankfully, I'm still here. You know,
yeah, thankfully you're still there.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the small business coaching the consulting that I do, a lot of it's just talking about exit strategy, right? Because what is your exit strategy? If you're running the business or if you wanted to, you know, retire at some point, right? So anybody else want to share?
I wrote down the word communication, which I think is in line with what Nancy was talking about. You know, you know, even if you're not around or you're gone, maybe you can continue to set up a communication path just to kind of keep things going or keep your clients interested, or they know you'll be back or something like that.
Yeah.
I wanted to add something to both what Nancy and Laura said, and to respond to what Tevis said. You're right, Tevis, like it's a self-care conversation and we shouldn't have to feel stressed. One of the reasons Marjorie and I wanted to share this story is because it's a story of survival. My business is doing better now than it was before I fell sick. So, I'm a raging optimist, and sometimes that my friends are like, how, why? But I was like, that's a survival instinct, nothing more than that. And it's practice that helps me develop that. But the reason I share that has made me more intentional with my business, because I'd seen the other side. I'm like, oh, what do I really want to do? You know, in the yoga world, there's a question called dharma, which is your purpose. So I was like, what is my purpose? Am I reacting to every opportunity that comes my way, or am I being intentional about seeking opportunities? So it's not just all bad that came out of that 6 months that I went through. It really made me more grounded, grateful, and focused on my business. So I did want to share that. For everything that's thrown our way in the moment, it just feels like, you know, we all feel like victims because why did it happen to me? But eventually there's always a lesson learned. So I just wanted to leave you all with that thought.
Yeah, and I feel you, and I think most of you know my story too, that I also had a moment of illness too, when I was running account management at a creative hot shop in New York, advertising agency, and through that, it was really from the stress of feeling like I had to manage everything in this environment, and be a high performer, and so it was definitely a meaningful pause for me, which led me on a journey to where I am today. And I found my calling, what I wanted to be doing, and I don't think I would have found that otherwise. So sometimes it's looking for a sign. I know Tevis wants to say something. The only reason I met my husband is because I had foot surgery and I had to slow down, and I went to an event I otherwise would not have gone to, because I would have been like running around doing something in the Hamptons or something like that. So slowing down, it really does create some opportunities sometimes. And sometimes your body is the first one to tell you to do that. So Tevis, what were you going to say?
It's so funny. This is really landing with me, because I'm reflecting on a time when our main client at the time was Bloomberg, and it was a huge account, you guys. It was like 7 figures. And we had a team, and I thought the team was empowered. And like, I thought I was the kind of leader that was empowering the team all the time, and that they were making their own, decisions and choices. And so I thought I had put all those pieces in place. And after about a year of huge push for the whole year, I was like, guys, I'm going to Greece for 10 days. Only call me if it's an emergency, right? You've got this, blah, blah, blah. And had all these sit downs and all these planning conversations, et cetera, right? And what was interesting is I get to Greece and my phone keeps ringing. And I literally started crying at one point to my right hand person, who was not the one I'm looking at right now. And as I'm thinking about this, I actually think that one of the things I've observed as a leader, and this was a hard won lesson, like really hard won lesson, is that the unconscious assumption of a superhero, right, syndrome is so embedded in our psyche, because most of us grew up with, whether we like it or not, patriarchal assumptions around what it means to lead, right? And even if we, think that we're leading from the feminine, or we think we're leading from a more collaborative, blah, blah, blah. I think that really what is part and parcel underlying this entire conversation is this question of, how do we build a life that allows for wholeness of ourselves and of others, so that when we want to go away for 2 weeks, or when we want to be out for an hour to get a workout, right? There is a whole ecosystem around us to facilitate that, right? So this correlation, I think, which I think that Marjorie and Sweta are doing an amazing job of underscoring, and I know that all of you guys get, but I also know that sometimes it just helps our brains when we state the obvious, or what that unconscious knowledge that we don't always act on, is that it's really an everyday action, right? And that while there may be these junction points in which we do put a plan in place, et cetera, it's really the question of, how do you lead every day, including leading yourselves, and how do you foster that awareness in your support network? That doesn't have to be employees. It can be contractors. It can be whoever, right? Like you were talking about your husband and how you're like, here's my account. Right? So I just wanted to underscore that, because you really teased that open in a nice way. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I wonder if that is a good time to launch this next poll, because I'm curious about how people are taking care of themselves a little bit, because, again, we're here making that connection between self and not only the bottom line, the financial, the emotional, the physical, the social even, right? So I'm curious, what statement can you most relate to of these? Sure, if everybody's, yeah. Has everybody responded? Okay, I'm gonna end the poll. I mean, I don't have time for self-care. We hear a lot from entrepreneurs, and the idea that I have something on my schedule to work out, or, whatever it might be, go to sleep at a certain time, this and that. And then I push it off because a client demand or self-sabotage. I decided to start looking at my Instagram reels or whatever in the middle of the night and send Tebas some videos. You're on mute.
Only you. No one else here does that, I'm sure.
And I'm happy to see a lot of people focus on progress, not perfection, and modeling behavior. And I want to talk more about that, because based on what we were just saying, and Tavis was just saying and underscoring, make that connection. Maybe write down, what do you think when you do take a moment for self-care, when you do step away, when you do act true to yourself in what you have made a commitment to yourself, when you set boundaries, and we can talk about that in a moment. I know Sweta has a lot to say about that. What's an observation you can make when you do practice a moment of self-kindness, self-care, whatever you want to call it? How does that impact your business? Yati?
Can I just want to add, when I saw the most recent poll that you popped up, I literally started to laugh, because I was like, I have all those competing ideas at once. Right. So it goes back to that the adage I wrote about, I think last week: which wolf are you going to feed? Right.
Ah.
So yeah, I started laughing. I was like, well, I've got all those voices.
Well, notice that I didn't allow you guys to choose more than
I did, you little.
Or I put all of the above. We purposely didn't do that.
I also wanted to add to that, Marjorie, like, if you even look at memes, and I love memes. Sometimes they're insane, but a lot of times they're a lot of fun. And most of it for entrepreneurs is about, like, and it was one of the options in your poll: I'll rest when I die, or, work today, live tomorrow, breathe tomorrow. And this whole concept of work-life integration or balanced living is never applicable to any memes when it comes to entrepreneurs. And like it's like a chip on the shoulder. People condone and they applaud 80-hour work weeks. There are times we all have those, you're on a deadline and you do that, but making that a lifestyle shouldn't be applauded. And I'm not judging or criticizing anyone. I'm just saying, like, this whole thing said, then you feel, if you're a solopreneur, you feel like, oh, am I not doing enough just because I'm not working 80 hours? So notice, even when I say that, my anxiety goes up. Like, there's stress in my body, my shoulders are lifted. So we need to have like conversation. And the same entrepreneurs, I know a lot of my clients, they will hit the gym 6 times a week. They will drink the green juice, but then they will work until 3 a.m, putting all that pressure on their heart, right? And then they'll go through a bottle of wine to deal with that stress. So I'm like, you thinking of just calorie intake and calorie outtake. You're not thinking of what's happening to your body on the whole, like the mind body. So I just wanted to put that out there. While it's great to take care of your physical body, your mental body and emotional body are not separate. One choice will impact the others, and all of that will impact your business.
Yeah, good, really good point. And that really underscores why I wanted you to think about what is the connection when you do take that moment and what you wrote down, right? And what happens versus when you don't. And it's okay when you don't. Let's just try to get to the more when you do, right? Yeah, go ahead, Sarah. And I think you're on mute.
I think when I take a moment and I walk around the block and I come back, what I'm able to do is actually suss out what is urgent and or important. Because everything that hits my inbox, when it first hits my inbox, it feels like both. Everything feels urgent and important. And I've definitely seen a difference when I'm able to breathe and literally circle the block once. I'm able to prioritize what needs my time and attention now. And that's definitely made a difference in my business, because otherwise I'll just be answering emails all day because everything feels so important.
Right. And how long did it take for you to circle the block?
Well, it depends on how fast I'm walking, but no more than 5 minutes.
5 minutes. That's what we're talking about here, right? 5 minutes, Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Peter, you're the only guy on this today, so I'm going to call you out because I think it's so interesting how men in particular don't sort of sign up to talk about this kind of stuff often, right? Because so talk to us. What is your practice? Why is this topic important to you?
So it's important to all of us. And I was in a little bit different position for most of you. I run a fairly large company. And we've actually more than doubled in size in the last year and a half.
Yeah, you guys have
Went
been going crazy.
From 30 employees to 80 employees, from 1 state to 14 states. And we're coast to coast now. So my workday is now extended across every time zone. And one of the things that as we grow this company, part of the culture that we want to build into this is that work-life balance, right? We know there's going to be bad, rough periods, but we want you to take time for yourself and focus on yourself as well. And that even comes from our parent company, does the same thing. When I first started here 3 years ago, the new CEO came down, we sat down and first question he asked me was, how do you like to work? He wants to know how I like to balance and manage my life, which was really refreshing. That's the first CEO of my entire 35-year career. Anyone's ever asked that?
Well, that is classic modeling of behavior and what is so desperately needed from all leadership today, especially where there's no divide between work-life balance. So really so go on.
Yeah. So, there's a whole bunch of stuff I can talk about. There's, one of the things I told the team as we're growing, I tell every new hire, I said, I'm always available. If there's an emergency, you can call me and text me. However, if you send me an email and there's 5 people on the 2 line, I say, I'm assuming someone else is going to take care of it because it's not to me. If you send me an email and I'm CC'd on it, I'll get to it when I get to it. You guys own it. It's informational. And I actually have a rule in my Outlook inbox. If I'm copied on something, I move it somewhere else and I'll read it when I have free time. If I have 5 people on a 2 line, you guys are dealing with it. You don't need me to deal with it. If you want me to do something, send it just to me. So I also set that culture for them. I want them to do the same thing I'm doing, right?
Yeah. I want to comment on that actually for a moment, because, I think that people shoot off emails, to get it off their plate very often. And I think setting boundaries around that makes people really uncomfortable sometimes. And I want to commend you on that because, Tevis and I have a little rule. If something's urgent, or something can wait. Like if one of us are out or taking the afternoon doing something else or whatever, but we need to get an email done, but we don't want the other person to look at it, we'll say tomorrow or something like that, or something in the subject line. Tevis, you were going to say something, I think.
I mean, this is so funny, Peter. I'm so glad you brought this up because nothing makes us quite as uncomfortable as being asked to be conscious about something we have grown very comfortable in being unconscious about, right? And when we first started to shift, because a lot of this does boil down to conscious productivity practices, right? And when we first started to introduce this stuff a couple of years ago, Oh my God, you would have thought, what? I have to specify all that stuff. I have to think about all that stuff because and all of us struggled with it. Like, because we do just want to like vomit out, brain vomit out, of course, eloquently with great language into an email, like everything there, I'm done, hot potato, right? But what we're really doing is we're screwing everybody because we're fire hosing. Right. Yep. And it's just, I love it that you brought that up. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's huge. And I want to build a culture as we grow the company of a place where people love to go during the day. And I say during the day intentionally, because I want them to go home and have a life at night. And, you know, growing up through my career, I didn't always have that. I had some really old school, pardon the expression, slave driver leaders in the company that wanted you at your desk, you know, 60, 70 hours a week. And it's not good for anybody. It's not good for the company, the clients, or the employees.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. You're absolutely right on that. We're seeing that a lot, like I said, in the training that the trainer program that we're doing with these leaders. Sweta, a lot of this is what we're talking about is boundary setting. Right. And you talk a lot about some of the lessons learned, some of the boundaries that you have set. And maybe we can talk about a couple more of the lessons learned, right? Because being in, whether it's Peter's position or a solopreneur position, it's lonely position. It can be a very lonely position to be in. And you and I talked about you know, the impact of that, right? The impact of right. Of that on your psyche and that again on your bottom line. So can you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So I think it just goes back to that, the big thing that we talked about is pausing and checking in with yourself, right? So when we think boundaries, the first thing that comes to mind is boundaries around yourself. So with family, with colleagues, with friends, I don't mean that in a negative way, so that, you know, you're more productive, but sometimes you have to build those boundaries around your own self. Because what the pandemic has done is we are not working smarter, we're working longer. I've had clients, we are 16 to 18 months into the pandemic, who still rolling out into the pajamas in the morning because they've Netflix through the night. And these are senior leaders. They're like, you know, where am I going to go? Because the routine has been taken away. So I was like, I get that. It's not that I miss being, you know, like fighting for a seat on the subway. And I say use fighting very loosely. But I miss that routine of waking up and showering and, you know, putting on some lipstick and going to work. It's become very intentional, the dressing up in the mornings, right? So the boundaries first have to start with your own self. Like, no, have that discipline in place. Whatever your schedule is, like, get to bed at a certain time. It's a whole different conversation. I can go on for years why we need to get to bed on time. And then starting your day. So building those healthy boundaries, even if it's that 5th cup of coffee you want, is that just a reactive thing? Or is it something like what Sarah does? Walk around the block. It takes 5 minutes to pour yourself a cup of coffee and 5 minutes to go around the block. See, like, check in with yourself. Do you really need that caffeine? Or is it, to Marjorie's point of view, is it point like, is that loneliness that's creeping in? Because, you know, we're not seeing people as often as we used to. So while there are many merits to work from home, I don't miss 3 hours in the subway, but I do miss the subway because that was my reading time. And now I have to, like, I feel like we've all grown so accountable for everything. Like earlier, you would get into work, you left work, whether you went to a gym, yoga studio, drinks, whatever. There was life outside of work before you came home. Or the days when you came home directly, there was still a way to break your day, right? Now everything has to be very conscious. Like, I live in a city apartment, so my yoga studio is my office, is my writing studio, is my gym. So, you know, and that's true for a lot of us. Like, we don't have defined spaces. So have those boundaries in place. Like, I will tell you, one of the things that I do is I use a specific chair for my writing deadlines. No other work happens on that, right? It's simple, but yet my brain knows when I sit in that chair, I'm working on my columns. I've deleted a lot of apps from my phone because it was just me working harder, not smarter. And being open to that. So even at work, when people will communicate, but, you know, we can do this on an app. I said, as you should. I'll check it when I log into my email. Right. Because I don't want to be, and again, I don't want to be like, not just attached, but like a slave to technology. because it's so easy to, just scroll through your phone mindlessly. And that again impacts your sleep, and that sleep will impact your productivity, and that impacts your bottom line.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that you're talking about, what we're all sharing here, is about a little bit about self first, right?
Yes.
Self first. It doesn't mean being selfish, right? And society puts a lot of expectations on all of us, right? To be perfect, and a lot of us want to be liked. Your name, and I when I spoke to Shveta this morning, I said, I've known you for years, but I'm a little embarrassed to say I don't know how to pronounce your name correctly, and I was always pronouncing it Sveta, right? And she was like, no, she's like, thank you, but it's Shita. And I'm pronouncing it right now, but sorry about that. And but I wanted to share that with you because your name means, you share that your name means white or pure, right? And you grew up in an environment where you were expected to be like the good Indian girl and not ask questions, right? And we as leaders are in an environment where we are supposed to know it all, right? A lot of people look to us to know it all, and we want to be liked. And so that juxtaposition of it being, whether it's personal or professional, and how do we manage that? I mean, thinking about the relationship of those two, it could be a very lonely conversation in our heads. But it's not a weakness to put yourself first, is my point. Do you want to comment on that, my dear?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is a bigger struggle for women globally, period, where, we care so much about what others think. So it goes back to Travis's point about like the patriarchal rules that we've been raised with. It might differ country to country, but degrees might differ, but it still very much exists. And I think the better you get to know yourself, and that's, there's studies that have been done for during the pandemic. People who managed to do okay were also people who were comfortable with their own company. At the start where you were not seeing anyone. So it goes back to that. And it's a human condition to want to be liked. But I also believe everyone's friend is no one's friend. So you have to know your values, you have to know your principles, and that might upset people. I wouldn't recommend going out and upsetting people because it takes a toll on your own health, which affects your bottom line. So I'm not for that, but it's okay if people get upset along the way, even if that's not your intention. It's important to find your tribe of like-minded people. And so for me, I grew up between India and North Africa and then came to the US. So extreme cultures, right? In North Africa, my dad's colleagues, women had separate living rooms, men had separate living rooms, even though women made coffee. And I was like this curious child at 7, always asking questions. If they have a separate living room, why can't they make their own coffee? And so my dad encouraged that. He was like, no, that's a good point. So I saw him make tea for my mom. So I'm like, you can make it home. Why can't, I didn't understand why they had separate rooms, but that's cultural. But then the men can make their own coffee, right? So it's important to have these conversations because we assume people won't understand. But my dad understood. And so we all have that one person in our lives. It might not be a parent or a partner or a sibling. It could be a coworker or a yoga studio buddy, right? So it's important to have these conversations. So the people you surround yourself with, we are the sum total of the 5 people we talk the most to, right? According to Jim Rohn, who nourish you in that sense. But again, I'm realistic. We all have family members or old friends we might not always relate to, but it's easier to just see them once a year than say, I never want to look at you. So make your choices, pick your battles, but on a daily basis, make sure you have these nourishing conversations towards your business, towards yourself, people who remind you that it's important to take care of yourself because you cannot serve from an empty place.
Yeah. And that can be really uncomfortable. And I want to encourage everybody to sit in your discomfort.
Yes.
Right? Because that's where change happens, right? Tevis and I talk about this a lot. And it's in her book, how to approach it. And growing a business can be uncomfortable. Dealing with employee issues and changing culture can be uncomfortable. Putting yourself can feel awkward and uncomfortable, right? So that's really when extreme growth can happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there something that you're sitting with that's uncomfortable right now? Right. So I'm going to ask you to write that down. Is there something in your business, in your personal life, whatever it may be, is there something you're sitting with that's uncomfortable right now that you want to avoid like that Dickens?
I also wanted to add, Marjorie, it's important to make time for nothingness, even if it's 20 minutes a day, because it's that
Yeah.
nothingness where it's intentional nothingness is when you get some of your best ideas, because you're not putting that pressure on yourself to perform. So even the brain goes into that like, oh, I can chill mode, and you really connect with yourself.
Yeah. Silence, right? Silence is golden, as they say, right?
It is.
So has everybody written down? I thank you for that. Has everybody written down something that you're sitting with that's uncomfortable right now? Yeah. What is, now write down, and I'm not going to ask you to share if you don't want to, but what is one thing that you can do to start to address that thing that is causing you discomfort? How can you face it? And maybe it is, like Sweta says, sitting with it in quiet, allowing yourself the time. So we only have a couple minutes left. Does anybody want to spend just like 30 seconds sharing what they are sitting with, that they can get some support from the group around? Or does everyone want to keep it personal? Go ahead, Sarah.
I don't mind sharing. I think the thing that I'm sitting with that's a little difficult is I'm pretty good at setting boundaries with clients. I've got my email that goes out that's here's when you can contact me, here's what you can expect, here's how you cancel. But then I have a lot of trouble when a client pushes that boundary, or after they've been told what the boundaries are, they keep asking for exceptions. So I have a lot of trouble enforcing boundaries that I've already set, and that makes me very anxious.
Yeah. So what can you do to shift that for yourself?
I wrote down create a script for those conversations, because I feel myself freeze up a little bit in the moment when I'm asked for an accommodation that I don't actually want to set. So I think literally writing out, here's how I could respond in integrity in that moment would be a helpful step to make that conversation, while still maybe uncomfortable, a little less uncomfortable.
Thank you. Yeah.
Could I share a suggestion?
Yes,
Sarah?
please.
So not the same, but something similar happened because I write a lot. So people like, 30-minute call, or can you introduce me to this, or can you do that? And when you're on social media, people believe they have an access to you, and they know you. What they know is your writing. It's the same thing with business. They know what you do, not who you are. So one of my mentors suggested, why don't you write an article? And it's pretty much a script with the link to things. Looking for a book coach, this is the person. Looking for so-and-so, that's so. I would get very riled up to them. Like, people just see the end product. They're not seeing the process. They don't know. They don't bother to know you as a person. There's this demand because they see the access has been granted, right? So they demand certain things of you. And that's been so good for my sanity, because whenever I'm like, sure, you might want to read this. And
That's
that
great.
yes, I don't take any credit for it. And writing it made me very uncomfortable. So I had to sit with my discomfort, going back to Marjorie's point, because maybe I want to be liked, right? I don't want to be that woman who says a no. But the first few times I did that, I was like, oh, I feel so clean, because I'm not putting any energy into something that didn't deserve my energy to begin with. So I thought,
I love that. Thank you for that.
sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you all. We're down to our last 2 minutes. Anyone want to share any parting thoughts? Shveta, I think your thought of allowing people to give themselves the gift of sitting in silence. She has a practice where, well, I don't think it's 12 hours anymore, right? But 12 hours a week, a sitting in silence practice, which your husband, I think you said, found so beneficial to you that he wanted to join you in doing it.
And he did. But you can tell I love to chat. I'm an extrovert, but so it was a big joke. Like I won't go 2 minutes without talking. And like the first hour was like dreadful. And the more I did it, it's incredible because your organs start to clean. They're not in a reactive mode. So, you know, your mind is settling in, your organs if they feel relaxed, and then and you're not in those 12 hours, you don't watch TV, write, eat, anything. So it's like a pure cleanse. It was just, my productivity went up by, I don't know how many notches. But in the pandemic, since we are home, I do more 4 hours, but I still do 4 hours of silence every week.
I love it, how it really nurtures your organs. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here and for participating. Like I said, our next one is on October 21st. It'll be a hot seat edition. So what I like to do in those is put a leader in the hot seat, and we talk about a problem that they're encountering, and I coach them on it. And we have a group conversation, and so we have one person who has a mid-sized business who is doing it, and then anybody else wants to be the other I'm not going to creator. Say the word. So thank you all. I'm seeing, and Tevis, it looks like you posted an article. You're on mute.
I know. I was trying to find the right button. It's funny because I was reading, this article, and it is speaking directly to employees, right? So for those of you who have employees, it's an interesting thing to think about. But when I read the article through a lens of a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a small business, et cetera, I realized that some of the questions really can shed some light for us as well. So I just want to share it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I'll be here for a minute if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, have a fabulous day. Really great to see all your faces.
Thank you so much, Marjorie.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
So
you.
great to meet everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.